if I think about in our current context or current day, the difference between a data scientist and a data engineer, I would say.
Okay, hello and everyone to the next episode of the Analytics India Magazine podcast, Simulated Reality. Today we have with us Arnab Ghosh, who is the Director of Data Engineering at Lowe's India. Welcome Arnab, how are you today?
Thank you, Kashyap. I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Data engineering, right? So we're going to, since you are the Director of Data Engineering, we're going to talk about how to build a team for data engineering. And in the world of chat GPTs and AGIs, I want to revisit the basics to understand how crucial is it to build data engineering teams. What role do these teams play? And if we don't have good data engineering teams, how can it impact data driven solutions? So let's start with that probably.
Sure. Uh, so data, as you rightly said, in the world of ChatGPT, we think about whatever ChatGPT can do or uh, large language model can do. I think basics are very important, right? So let me give you an example. So let's say you are a pilot of an airplane, you are starting your flight and your GPS shows 1 degree more or less, like inaccurate information, and you are relying on that, right? Think of we starting from Bangalore, and since you are going to SFO, let's say we are heading out to SFO there, think about it's just 1 degree right or left inaccuracy is there in your GPS. Think about where you will land, right? So that is very powerful. What I think, because data is fundamental to everything we do with data, be it simple BI reporting, data science, ML, large language model. So that's why it is so very important to have a solid data engineering team who will give you the trusted data, clean data that you can rely on and drive your that can drive your enterprise decisions in the right manner.
Okay, thank you for taking the instance and example and helping us understand. Now that we have understood the significance of building a data engineering team and a solid data engineering team, let's say we start hiring for the data engineering team, right? What are some of the talent that people look for when it comes to data engineering team? What are some of the non-negotiable skills that you look for in a data professional when hiring for your data engineering talent?
Right. So if I think about hiring engineers, right? So there are wide range of tech skills that we talk about. I think it would be driven mostly by the organizational lead and where you are, what you are going to do with the data engineers, what type of work that you are trying to drive. Because the skill set, it's like if I try to write a skill set of the data engineers, you would have seen like it can cross pages, right? So first, I think we have to identify what skills we are hiring for, we need, right? Tech skills, ETL, database, big data, cloud, and the list goes on, programming. But I think in terms of, you mentioned non-negotiables, right? So there are two things that I can think of are really non-negotiable, because if you think about today and 2 years back, the tech stack, whatever we work on today, is entirely different than whatever it was 2 years back, right? So I think the basic fundamental non-negotiable trait for any individual would be the ability to learn new things quickly,
Okay.
right? And put things into practice. The other thing that I can think of, it's a very generic skill but very important in the context of data engineering. Data engineers work with a bunch of other teams, right? So they work with data scientists, they work with business stakeholders, they work with other software engineers who are building applications. So in that context, I think collaboration is one of the most important skill that the data engineers can have, effective collaboration.
Okay.
So apart from tech, I would say ability to learn and collaboration are the top skills that comes to my head.
Okay, that's interesting because none of the two non-negotiable skills have anything to do with data. They are just to do with your personal skills and ability
Yes,
to learn.
absolutely.
And I think that is something of a common theme that we have seen across in any technology role. The ability to adapt quicker, plus work across multiple stakeholders, right? In terms of the entire role itself, right? And I want to talk about how will you structure a team, right? Because now as we go forward, I think data engineering as a field is becoming more and more structured. Like initially it was just Probably, and when I used to work as a data scientist, probably some of the job roles or job descriptions that are described in a, job opening of a data engineering, I used to do that as a data analyst, right? I never, we always did that. Why was there a need to separate this role, and what is that difference, data scientist and data engineering, and what do you look for in a data engineering when building a team as opposed to data scientist? If we can identify the differentiating factor, that would be helpful for everyone.
Right. So in an ideal world, let's say when you are working as a data scientist or irrespective of the role, right? If I know everything, that is the best thing, but it's very difficult to get,
A
right?
generalist, yeah.
Generalist, right? Now there is another driving factor is like if you think about the growth of data, explosion of data that we have in every business today, right? So everyone is talking about data. Every organization is trying to be a data-driven organization. So the amount of data that we are dealing with is increasing every day, right? Now, scale is a problem in itself, right? So that's why I think that specialization of data engineering is needed when you are trying to solve data at scale, right? If it is not, I think any generalist will do. So that's why I would say there is not a right or wrong about it, doing everything. So whatever you are doing was probably perfectly all right in your context. But if you are dealing with a lot of data, if you are dealing with petabytes of data on a daily basis, you need a specialized team,
Yeah.
right? And if I think about in our current context or current day, the difference between a data scientist and a data engineer, I would say, like I said in the beginning, right? If there are a lot of overlaps, that works great. But if I have to draw a line, right, an engineer should be able to build data pipelines, processes, and implement the engineering best practices to produce quality data on a regular basis within defined SLA, right? Engineering basics,
Yeah.
right? Whereas data scientists focus on more of coming up with something new, solving new business case, new use cases.
Correct, correct. One of the things that that stuck with me in your answer is scale, right? And I think this is just my opinion. I think that personally, initially there were just data analysts, and data analysts only did the job of data scientists because the roles are not defined. The field was new. There were people who were just the data science was a newer world. I think now that every organization, big organization is using data, data science, and not just big organizations, even medium to medium large companies are using it, then demand for it is higher. I know there can't be like a magic number, or there can't be a magic this thing, but can we help our audience understand when is it that you need to have a separate team? Is it because of the scale, or is it because of the kind of function or solution you are building? And if it is the scale, then what can you put it with? Is it the size of data, or is it the size of the problem, or is it the maturity of the problem, or what kind of factors play into role? I want to talk in quantities, right? When you need to segregate the role of data scientists or data engineers, lows for that matter, right? Your organization it's a big GCC now. It's a big captive. We have around 300 to 500 data professionals, if I'm not wrong. What is it that defines the need to separate a data engineering team from a data science team?
Right. So I'm just trying to think and process whatever you are saying, right? So essentially, um, I wish there was a single answer to
Yeah,
that, right?
there.
So I would say that let's take example of Lowe's, right? So like you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's a Fortune 40 company. It's a very old company, very big company,
Yeah.
and there are similar enterprises across the board, right? There are multiple factors, right? Um, I will talk about those factors. I don't know if we can put a number to that. One is the complexity of your business system, right? Because
Business system, okay.
so essentially, if you are existing for more than 100 years, you will have a mix of legacy system, you will have a mix of modern system, right? So the complexity of taking data out of those system is one factor,
Okay.
right? Which you have to deal with. Then comes the size of the data, which is very obvious, right? So when you are processing massive amount of data, you need certain bit of depth and expertise to do that efficiently. And the third would be, I would say that any organization, when they go into try to become a data driven organization, it's a journey in itself, right? So I think the first thing that any organization tries to do is to solve via analytics, right? Analytics meaning like when business is asking question and we are providing answers to those questions and churning out those very, very quickly, right? So the next level of maturity was when those questions, all the recurring questions we are trying to solve using a product, right? So that is probably the, I would say, pivot when you should start thinking about data engineering teams, right? So when you want to build data products which you need answers on a regular basis, that is the point probably you should start thinking of it, right?
Correct. And now that we have established when or what factors might define it, what should be the size of the team and what are some of the factors that influence the size? Again, I'm sure there is no definitive answer to it, or you say that there's so many GBs of data, there's so
Correct.
many number of this thing. I think it's very different. But what are some of the factors that define the size of the team, and can you explain some of the thought process behind how do you define the size of the team? Data engineering team, yeah.
Right. So thinking out loud, so I would say one of the factors would be the number of uh, subdomains that you have within business. So let's talk about retail, right? So retail has 5-6 business functions, right? So based on that, that is one driving factor. How many business functions you need to support, right? And you might not need to support all the business functions to begin with, right? And then I would say that the priorities of the organization plays a big role, right? So let's say you want to solve a merchandising problem today and this year. So you take a call based on that, right? So there is not a magic number, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I would say start small. That always works, right?
Okay.
Be conservative in that approach, right? We don't need to hire 200 data scientists or 500 data engineers to begin with in the beginning.
Correct.
I would say what I have seen is that learning, it's always a continuous learning in spite of the fact that you would have solved the problem in 3 other places. It's always, organization in itself always is very unique, right? So I would say
Yeah.
starting small is probably the way to go, and then you figure out the size.
Okay, but when does a person go from a team of 2 to 4? Why and why? Can you give us an example? And
Right.
yeah.
So typically, I don't think we can quote this, but they call that the data scientist to data engineer ratio is anywhere between 2 to 5, right? So,
Okay.
so think of that. If you want to see that, because you are talking from a data science, you are coming from a data science perspective, right? So if you think there is one data scientist, there will be 2 to 5 data engineers, right? So typically that is the ratio, that there is no golden ratio again, but then that is typically the thought process.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. Now that we've talked about the size, the need, and when do you identify the need, let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy, or like how are they structured, so that we cover all the aspects of it, right? What are the different roles within data engineering? Because there's a lot of technologies. So there's data mesh, there's the data lake, there's someone who's working on cloud, there's someone who's engineers. What are the different sub roles within them, and how do you can you help us picture a typical good data engineering team of 5-6 people, let's say, and what are the different roles they play and what do they hire for? And then probably we can go to a little bit more a level up, and how does a person who leads the team can kind of this thing. And then I also want to talk about the data architect. So probably let's start with the base, like what is the composition and what are the different roles they play.
So a typical data engineering team has, let's say, all different grades of data engineers,
Okay.
right? And in terms of skills, I can maybe quote a kind of a sample
Yeah,
set of
typical,
set
like,
of
yeah.
skills, right? So let's say there are different type of data sources, right? Batch data, streaming data. So you talk about skills like Kafka, then SQL, then Spark, then Hadoop, then cloud skills, there are a lot of services on cloud offering. I'm not going into details of that, but I would say typically those are the basic skill set you look for. And one fundamental skill set would be understanding of distributed system, right? Because in our earlier world we used to work with a lot of monolithic, right? And in order to address the scale problem, we have moved to a distributed world, right? So irrespective of the exact skill that you are looking for within the team, I would say understanding of the distributed system matters. And then you put the hierarchy on top of that. So you have data engineers, senior data engineers, lead data engineers, and so on and so forth.
And how is managing a team of, let's say, 5, 6 data engineers different from, you're the director, so I'm sure there are associates, and then there are managers, senior managers in this thing. What is the role of a manager and senior manager in a data engineering team, and how is it different from a data science manager, for that matter? What are the different skill sets you look for, as well as what is their day-to-day role different like?
Right. So the way I look at it is the abstraction changes, right? So the level of abstraction as you go higher in the ladder, the level of abstraction changes, right? So if you think of a data engineer, they are thinking about their specific product, their specific pipeline, and so on and so forth. As you move up, you have to operate with a level of abstraction. So think of a senior manager here, right? So senior manager is taking care of the implementation of the product that he is dealing with, right? And he is going into the nitty-gritties of everyday execution. A director will probably go a little level up. He or she will work with the managers. He is not going to go to that level of detail so that it interrupts the work of the manager, but at the same time he needs to be up to date with whatever is happening with the other team and intervening whenever is needed. Now think of a senior director or a VP. That level of abstraction just changes, right? Um, I I would say that it might be the same from a data science manager as well. Just the skill set would vary because the technical skill sets will be the same across the team. The data engineering leader has to be skilled with the same set of skills that the team is having.
Fantastic. Okay, and my final question to you is: somebody is starting tomorrow. They identify the need for a data engineering team, right? You have built your team from scratch. What are some of the 1 or 2 pieces of advices that will really will stick with them, and like kind of they will be able to efficiently build the data engineer? What would you tell the?
Right. So I would say that focus on hiring the right engineering leaders in the beginning.
Hiring the right engineering leaders.
That is
Yeah.
one of the first step, right? And when you are hiring the engineering leader, taking a cue from my last point, think about the level of abstraction at which he or she needs to operate,
Correct.
because otherwise we will have a wrong hire at the end of the day, right? We don't want to do that.
Okay.
Now, after that, you can call this as a skill versus fit kind of a criteria, right? The higher you go, you worry about the fit more than the skill. Now, skill is very important, but the skill assessment, how you do it changes, right? So, for an engineer, you can have a coding round, design round, and all that. But for an engineering leader, you might have to skip the coding round, but you still do system design. But at the end of the day, the skills can be validated in indirect method. But fit becomes important because that leader will have a lot of influence on the rest of the other team. When I talk about fit, fit comes in different forms, right? So it is like a technical fit, and then you need to understand his strategic skills. You need to so okay, let's only think about technical and strategic, right? And people skill. Three different skill set you look at. So technical skills you validate using system design interviews and so on and so forth. Strategic, you see how he or she is able to communicate effectively the vision and the mission of the team, whatever they have walked in, right? And regular people skill would be like performance management, conflict management, and prioritization, and so on and so forth, right? So we talked about abstraction, we talked about skill versus fit, and then the other would be and in terms of fit, right? So fit, maybe we can break down into 3 or 4 points, right? One is value, because the value of your organization and the value of that person has to align. So let's say your organization believes in moving fast and okay with making mistakes. If the leader is the opposite, it might create problem, right? So that alignment is needed. Then I would say the second would be like I would think of intellectual humility. What I mean by that is ability to listen to others,
Okay.
right? And then ability to, I would say, realign based on need, right? Having a strong opinion but flexible to change as needed, right? So we covered intellectual humility, value system. Um, yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, no, I
Maybe.
think that's
Yeah.
a great framework to have. Hire the right roles, define the roles good, and define their skills really well.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, perfect. I think we have covered all the angles to building a good, solid data engineering team. Thank you so much, Arnab, for coming,
Thank you so
and
much
I
for
hope you
having
had
me.
fun.
Thank you.